they had a really big project going on at Mercury at the time. Billy Ray Cyrus had just sold like 10 million albums. So they were pretty much consumed with that. Harold had signed Shania, and somebody else had signed a guy named John Brannon. And Luke wanted Shania and Brannon to be their backs, and I'd been sitting on hold for a year and a half. And Harold was head of creative, and he had went in and fought for me to get my album out in January, combine them, and put all three of us out on what they called the Triple Play Tour. They brought all the execs and managers and people in from Mercury, and everybody involved with this Triple Play Tour. And we did a show for them. We each got 30 minutes. And we did it. And then Luke walks over in front of everybody and goes, "You're going on first. Shania will be in the middle, and John's going to close." Harold looked at me and he said, "Don't worry about it, pal. Keep your head on. You're going to be fine in anything at this point. So don't worry about it." So on the way to Louisville, Shania's in the back of the bus. She comes screaming to the front of the bus and says, "Bowling Green, Kentucky, on the way to Louisville." She said, "Come back and listen." Anyway, we go to the back of the bus, "Should Have Been a Cowboy," blaring on the radio. Now, all three of our singles and albums have been released. And here's the first thing we've heard from the Triple Play, and it's blaring on Bowling Green, Kentucky radio. So it's the first time I heard myself on the radio. We got there. The place was full. I went on first. I played 7 or 8 songs, and then would go wait for them to finish their show, and then we would all come out and do an encore song together. I played "Should Have Been a Cowboy" third, and it went over so big that my last song of my set, I did it again. I played "Should Have Been a Cowboy" again. So by about the third week of this tour, John started requesting to Luke that I needed to close the show. And of course, Luke contacted me. We had a big song coming. I mean, my song was climbing the charts. It was doing well. Had a good song. And Luke came to me and said, "Hey," said, "we want y'all to flip. We want John to go on first and you to go on last." And I said, "Nope, deal. I'm not doing it." So that night, Harold called and said, "Hey, pal, I really need you to flip spots." And I said, "Absolutely, for you, I'll do it." So as soon as Harold called, I flipped it. But we had a wonderful time through that ride. And the whole time, you go from nothingness to something overnight. Don't feel overnight, but to the public, it looks overnight. And all of a sudden, you've got people standing in your front yard, and you're having to gate yourself in somewhere. And all that was happening at a real fast pace. The calming factor in all of this was that Harold just kept talking to me and telling me, "Keep your feet on the ground, keep your head square, don't list all this other BS." And so after I got through that first little period of trying to figure it all out, it became easy. I just settled back into a normalcy, and I just went to work. And for the next 20 years, I put an album out every single year. And I don't think there was an artist that's done that ever, but I put an album out every single year. I would hope that he knows I love him and that I saw how much he did for other people. And I always wanted to make sure that he knew that I cared. So I treated Harold the last time I saw him just exactly like I treated him the first time I met him. People ask me all the time, they say, what's the biggest song in your opinion in your career? And, we've had some 5 and 6 week Billboard #1s. And I think there was a period for 4 years there where we were #1 on Billboard a quarter of the weeks, like 51 weeks out of 4 years or something. We were sitting at #1. I go back and tell them that Should Have Been a Cowboy is the foundation that this whole thing stood on. Cowboy came second that Harold and Nelson put that baritone guitar on my little cowboy song and made it really Western. The second that happened, you could tell in their demeanor that they knew there something magic had happened in the studio. You know, I always told them, I said, once I started dressing out of my own closet and singing my own songs and releasing the songs that I wanted to release, is when my career exploded. Up to that point, I was doing what everybody else told me to do, you know. And not necessarily Harold. Harold was teaching me how to be a man and how to be an artist and a successful one. He was a tremendous mentor to me, and probably as close to a father figure as I had in the business. You know what was great with Harold is he had a group of people like Nelson Larkin, Curly Corwin, Larry McFadden, Freddie, my manager. He had certain guys that he trusted being in his circle. He knew he didn't have to. He knew didn't have to be. He didn't have to be on that day. He didn't have to be in the business. He didn't have to worry about protecting his job. He knew these people would let him just be a dude. And early on, even before my album came out, he was hauling me around to meet these people. I'd go to Branson with him and hang out with Larry McFadden, Mel Tillis, Curly, all of his guys that he trusted, that he would drink a tequila with in the evening, or he would travel with. Hell, I was right in that circle with him. He'd haul me around with him. I'd make trips with him. So I felt like I could trust him early on. And sure enough, when it came down to whether my album was going to get released or not, he went in and fought for me. And everything in my career stands on that battle right there. Well, I think if you look at the body of work, if anybody who's in that side of the business, if they're ever deserving of being in the Country Music Hall of Fame, Harold would be. His body of work's ridiculous. I mean, the magnitude of and the impact that his artists had. I mean, like I mentioned them, Alabama, Cyrus sold 10 million on one album. Shania, me, KT Oslin, first woman ever, I think, to have a double platinum album, first female. No one would sign her because she was already 40 years old. I mean, and then you look at how different those acts are. Alabama was the first group. We didn't have a group. We had quartets. Rock and roll had bands. Country music didn't have bands. They had a lead singer, a front person, and a band. That's all they had, a front person with a group. Alabama hit the board. They were the first real band that I can ever remember us having. Then the Headhunters were there in their own right. They were completely different than any other thing coming down the pike. Shania's big success, my success. The acts he's produced, like Glenn Campbell, people like that. I mean, if they put people like Harold Shedd that does what he does for his whole life in the Hall of Fame, then he'd be at the top of the list on my vote. He was the guy that was responsible for everything. He opened the doors. If you added up Harold's artists, album sales, and airplay, I don't know if anybody else is in his league. Harold, happy birthday, buddy. I've been to a few of them before, and I wish you 90 more. That's many a moons. And I just wrote a song called Don't Let the Old Man In, and you didn't. You got up every day, and you were productive, and when you went outside, you slammed the door behind you. You didn't let him in. So wish I could have a tequila with you And in the words of Tommy Griggs, when you used to take me to the old Bullpen Lounge Steakhouse and somebody would have a birthday, Harold, you don't look 90, but we remember when you did. Godspeed, buddy.